Who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid. Yes, and Latino voters are fluid.
Bill Maher goes straight after AOC, and it hits hard. He never liked the New York Congresswoman from the moment she entered the political stage, and now her recent statements, mixed with her progressive stance, have only made things worse. Across multiple intense moments on Real Time with Bill Maher, the outspoken comedian goes all in on AOC, delivering sharp, bold criticism that grabs attention and refuses to let go. This is powerful, direct, and impossible to ignore, so stay locked in because this is where it gets serious.
James Carville knew how to win, and he blamed the Democratic losses this November 2nd on stupid wokeness. To which AOC fired back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. What? This is a term folks like you brought out very recently and had been proudly displaying at every march since. Just last year, The Guardian declared woke the word of our era. I guess they didn't get the memo from the Mean Girls Club.
AOC has long been linked with woke politics, and critics argue she is drifting further away from the concerns of everyday people. The New York Congresswoman once embraced the word woke proudly, showcasing it at rallies and public events as if it elevated her above others, but the climate has shifted now. The term woke is widely viewed as a sign of being disconnected from real-world struggles, and as the backlash grows louder, AOC appears to be stepping back, attempting to reshape her image and distance herself from the very ideas she once celebrated. But Bill Maher is not convinced. On Real Time with Bill Maher, he calls her out directly, refusing to let her quietly redefine her narrative. The result is sharp, honest, and impossible to look away from.
What a great strategy, never missing an opportunity to remind voters how lame and clueless and hopelessly uncool they are, especially since those are the ones who actually vote. But okay, fine. What word would you like us to use for the plainly insane excesses of the left that are not liberalism, but something completely different? Because you can't have that word liberal from us and think it should cover things like canceling Lincoln and teaching third graders they're oppressors. That's all your new...
This is exactly why so many people respect Bill. Maher does not soften his message or filter his words. He speaks with blunt force, saying what many are unwilling to say. If AOC is now moving away from the term woke, it raises a serious question. What should we call the extreme ideas tied to it? For years, concepts have been pushed into mainstream culture that many people strongly reject. Ideas about identity, authority, and fairness that continue to spark intense debate. These are the issues people connect with woke culture, so even if the label is dropped, the core ideas remain. And Bill Maher makes one thing clear. Changing the name does not erase the reality underneath, and people will continue to push back.
Every month I see a new poll reporting how much Latinos despise the woke term Latinx. It's about as popular with them as a reboot of Speedy Gonzales. Even the country's oldest Latino civil rights group came out against it, yet AOC keeps defending it, saying gender is fluid, language is fluid.
It is impossible to ignore how strongly liberals push the term Latinx, with figures like Gavin Newsom and AOC leading the effort, presenting it as modern and inclusive from the start. However, a large portion of the Latino community did not even understand the meaning, and many openly rejected it. Polls and street conversations made it clear the very people this term was supposed to represent felt no connection to it, yet the push continued as if those promoting it were not listening to the community they claimed to defend. Eventually, the backlash became too strong to ignore. Gavin Newsom stepped away quietly and stopped using the term, while AOC continued defending it by saying language changes and evolves, but for many voters, that response felt disconnected and dismissive. Moments like this did not create meaningful discussion. They eroded trust, and in the end, that loss of trust followed voters straight to the ballot box.
And more of them now than ever are identifying as Republican. So are Asian Americans, whose support for Democrats is down 16 points since the last election. A lot of that is because, in the name of achieving equity in schools, Democrats in deep blue cities have made it a mission to eliminate the advanced programs at which Asian kids excel. Asian parents said, okay, I wish all kids well, not a racist, but I need someone who acts like my lawyer. If you're a parent and wanted schools to reopen a lot sooner than they did after COVID shutdowns, or think maybe your kid is getting a bad education, partly because it's nearly impossible to fire a lousy teacher, yeah, you're going to say, congratulations, teachers, you got yourself a good lawyer. The Democratic Party's always got your back, 100%. But I've noticed my kid is kind of an idiot.
Party are now turning away, and it is not because of complex political theory. It is because people feel frustrated and unheard. These voters are tired of being talked at instead of being listened to. They no longer care for empty speeches or symbolic gestures that do nothing for their daily lives. What matters to them is simple. They want quality education for their children. They want an economy where effort leads to real results. They want safety in their neighborhoods, and they want leaders who act instead of just speak the point. Bill Maher makes it clear. When politicians focus more on cultural trends than real problems, they do not just lose arguments, they lose voters, and once people feel ignored for too long, they move on to someone who actually understands them.
And who do you see on the horizon for 2028 in the Democratic primary?
Right now?
Yeah.
Bernie and AOC.
No.
They got the biggest crowds.
That doesn't matter.
It won't sustain itself, but right now they have no leader. Okay? But this is the thing the Republican Party has to understand, too. Both parties lost in the last election. Trump won, okay? And I don't know if that's going to transfer.
It may not be entirely clear what Kevin McCarthy intended in detail, but one message stands out. If figures like AOC and Bernie Sanders take control of the Democratic Party, it could create serious challenges during elections while they attract large, energetic crowds and passionate supporters. Recent elections show that crowd size does not guarantee votes. Excitement at rallies often fades when people enter the voting booth. History has shown this before, where strong media presence, celebrity backing, and packed events created the illusion of inevitable victory, but the final results told a different story. Winning elections requires more than enthusiasm. It demands a broad message, careful strategy, and policies that resonate beyond a loyal base. Without that balance, energy alone cannot secure victory.
Adjacent, and then Vance and Jr. will fight it out for that crowd.
You're AOC and Bernie, and who's at the top of the ticket?
They're going to lead right now.
Who's at the top of that ticket, Kevin? Because if it's not Bernie, he's going to be vice president and then wait his turn?
No, it would be. Bernie's been running each time. I'm just saying who's in the lead right now. I don't think that's how it ends up.
But big crowds don't necessarily mean who's the right candidate. You know, when I started
but it drives where the ideas are going to go. It's going to drive the money for a while.
It doesn't make them the winner.
It doesn't make them the winner. You'll have to wait till you'll get 2 years out, and then you'll start seeing these governors that start showing solutions. You also have to know, what is the issue going to be? Are we going to have a foreign policy issue? Are we going to have an economic issue? And who's been the best in leading in that? But right now, for the Democrats, who's going to lead for the next 2 years, the money is going to... AOC outraised everybody in the House.
And it's all small dollars.
This criticism continues to follow Democrats. Elections have never been decided by money alone. Looking at Kamala Harris in a recent election cycle, she raised an enormous amount of campaign funding within a short time, creating headlines and the appearance of unstoppable momentum. Yet when voting day arrived, that financial advantage failed to deliver success. The outcome became one of the most significant defeats for Democrats in recent memory. The lesson is straightforward. Money can amplify a message, but it cannot improve a weak one. Voters are not influenced solely by spending or polished campaigns. They respond to authenticity, clear direction, and policies that directly impact their lives. Without that genuine connection, even the most well-funded campaign can collapse when it matters most.
Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people know that yet. I don't think people realize we already have a lot of socialism. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want.
Bill Maher highlights a point that resonates with many voters. There is often confusion between mainstream Democrats and democratic socialists, leading people to group figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zoran Mamdani together. However, this comparison is not entirely accurate. While they operate within the Democratic Party, their beliefs align more closely with democratic socialism, which supports a greater role for government in economic and social systems. This distinction is important, especially for voters concerned about policies shifting too far left. Critics argue these ideological differences influence proposals in ways that do not align with broader public opinion, and this is exactly the concern. Bill Maher raises that if someone like AOC were to lead the Democratic ticket, it could alienate moderate voters and weaken the party's position in elections.
DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden was doing, but more. You think you're going to win an election on that? This just seems like more extremism at a time when Americans are begging both parties, please, could just one of you act?
Bill Maher lays out his argument with clarity. There is no clear path to victory for AOC if she continues to embrace what critics describe as extreme progressive and democratic socialist positions. While these ideas energize her core supporters, they risk pushing away moderate voters who ultimately decide national outcomes. The tension lies between political practicality and ideological commitment policies associated with places like New York, including expanded public benefits that critics argue extend to undocumented immigrants, as well as proposals such as expanded public transit linked to figures like Zoran Mamdani contributes to this perception, whether fair or not. These policies shape how voters interpret a candidate, and perception often becomes the deciding factor on Election Day.
Police or military in the streets, either MAGA's crypto crony capitalism or city-run grocery stores. No, I don't want that. I want a Democrat who reassures me if you like your Whole Foods, you can keep your Whole Foods.
When viewed from a broader perspective, Bill Maher presents a central argument that cuts through everything. Elections are not won through ideology alone. They are won through trust, perception, and genuine connection with everyday people. Figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez can energize a strong and vocal base, but that energy does not always extend far enough to secure national victory. Many voters are growing skeptical of messaging that feels disconnected from real life and are instead prioritizing stability, opportunity, and practical solutions over bold ideological visions. The lesson remains simple yet frequently ignored. Momentum, funding, and media attention hold little value without widespread appeal. If the Democratic Party fails to maintain that balance, it risks repeating the same mistakes, and as Bill Maher emphasizes, ignoring these signals does not just cost attention, it costs elections. And with that, today's video comes to an end. If you enjoyed what you watched, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.